The story started as a man named von Flüklid, also the king of the first continent and a notorious criminal. He said that his grandson is likely to become a rare villain, and all the 4 continents will perish by his hands. That's why von Flüklid killed his grandson in his past lives, but it was impossible to change the predestined fate. Flüklid experienced countless failures and saw the destruction of the world every time, with only despair remaining in the 4 continents. That's why Flüklid decided to become more cruel, but in the end, he embraced hope the day his grandson was born, and couldn't kill him. The name of this little boy is Cain von Euclid. He's our protagonist and we shall call him Cain. Flüklid called out his cute grandson and he replied, "Yes, grandfather." He then told Cain to follow him. As they were leaving, von Flüklid told Cain that if they can't change fate, then he will make Cain strong enough so that whatever fate comes his way won't be able to affect him. From then on, our MC went on a 13 years long journey with his grandfather. 13 years later, in the 4th continent, a land governed by strength, a huge man held a trembling woman hostage. His voice boomed as he demanded the swordsman hand over their goods, or he'd end her life. "Hurry up," he barked. "Do you want to trade for this woman or not?" The woman, in tears, pleaded desperately. "Please save me. I have a child, please." Her voice cracked as she begged. Among the swordsmen, a female warrior turned to their lord and said that they can't let go of the goods at any cost. It's too important to the clan. Another swordsman standing behind them hesitated, but they could save her life if they just give the man what he wants. The lord was torn. Frustration lined his face as he shouted at the towering man. "Is it not shameful for a so-called warrior to take a woman hostage?" The huge man grinned. "Say what you want. It doesn't change the fact that her life depends on their decision." The woman broke into sobs, saying that her child just started walking the day before yesterday. She begged them to save her. The lord clenched his fists. "Damn it," he muttered, his mind racing. He's in a tight spot, and don't know what to do. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension. "So, you're Kurogami Makoro, the Black Wolf Demon?" The huge man's expression twisted into a snarl. "Who's there?" From the shadows emerged a guy with a cold gaze. Turns out to be Cain, our grown MC. Cain said to the huge man, "So you have succumbed to evil." The huge man froze in confusion. What does he mean by that? Before he could finish, Cain stepped without hesitation, struck, and in an instant, both the hostage and the huge man fell to the ground, their severed heads rolling in the dust. The lord of the swordsmen erupted in rage. "Why? Why did you kill the hostage too? Who are you to do such a thing?" Cain didn't answer. Instead, he sprinted toward the group with deadly precision. In a blur, he slayed the swordsman standing behind the lord. The warrior lord screamed in shock and charged at Cain. "How dare you attack my men?" the lord yelled. He raised his blade, but Cain parried with an almost casual flick of his sword, sending the lord flying backward. As the lord crashed to the ground, he muttered, "Damn it, he've lost control. Now it's over for him." The female swordsman lunged at Cain, her weapon aimed straight for his throat. But Cain didn't flinch. As the blade approached, he spoke in an icy tone. The hostage was an accomplice of the demon, that's why he killed her. Her blade froze midair as his words sank in, and the battlefield was silent. The warrior lord stared at Cain, in disbelief as he asked, "What does he mean by an accomplice? She looks normal. She doesn't look like a demon." Cain crossed his arms and replied flatly, "Also the guy he killed, their fellow warrior? Yeah, he was an accomplice too." The lord's jaw dropped. "What the hell? That's impossible." Cain smirked and gestured toward the bodies. "If you don't believe me, check their pockets." Makoru, being part of the Kurumi demons, always carries proof of their allegiance. The warriors hesitated but eventually checked the 3 bodies. Sure enough, they found the unmistakable badge of the Kurumi demons. The lord shook his head, stunned. He couldn't believe it. That warrior has been with them for years. How could he have been in cahoots with demons? The group bowed in gratitude to Cain, one of them saying, "Thank you for figuring this out for us." Cain waved them off. No need to thank him. He only did what anyone else would have done. The lord stepped forward. But wait. How did he know they were Kurumi demons? How could he be so sure? Cain shrugged. It's not like he knew they were demons. He simply attacked evil. His blade never lies, it always strikes true against wickedness. In the next scene, the atmosphere shifted to a lively bar, where people from various tribes drank and celebrated. Cain's grandfather, von Flüklid, sat beside him sipping his drink and smirking. "You did well defeating evil and saving the good," Flüklid commended. With a serious look, Flüklid then asked, how was Cain so sure the hostage was an accomplice of the Kurumi demons? What if she had been innocent? Cain replied that she wasn't innocent, she was with the demons. On what basis, Flüklid asked. Cain tapped the pendant hanging around his neck. This pendant, the grandpa gave to him years ago. It revealed their true nature. They were cloaked in darkness. Flüklid let out a dry laugh. Oh, the sacred ring. So it did tell you. Interesting. Cain raised an eyebrow. Wait a second. Isn't the sacred ring a divine artifact from the third continent? Grandpa, you didn't steal it, did you? Flucklid scoffed. Quiet. There was no other way to interfere with his fate, and yes, he borrowed it permanently. Cain grinned slyly. Did you borrow anything else? Maybe a piece of the celestial realm? Of course I did, Flucklid retorted. You think artifacts grow on trees? Cain laughed. So Grandpa's a legendary thief and a great warrior. Not bad. Flucklid shook his head. You talk too much. Be quiet before someone hears. Their banter ended with Flucklid's serious tone as he asked Cain to tell him if the ring truly shows him their darkness. Cain nodded. Yes. The 3 people he killed were entirely evil. So he followed his grandpa's teachings and acted without hesitation. Flucklid sighed. Then it seems Cain's heavenly killing star has broken free from fate's shackles. He said Cain shouldn't dwell on these things too much, or his head would explode. Flucklid told Cain that he has now inherited his looks and strength, after all. Cain snorted. Was that a compliment or an insult? Take it however you like, Flucklid said with a laugh. Later that night, as they prepared to rest, Flucklid called out, Cain Von, there's nothing left to bind you. Live freely. With a determined face, Cain replied that he'll do good for good and show endless malice for evil. The grandpa said that hearing those words reassures him. He's really glad. The next morning, Cain awoke to a letter on the table. As he read it, his grandfather's words echoed in his mind. He's sorry to say this, but their journey ends now. He told Cain to live a life unbound by fate. And remember, no matter what anyone says, you are not a villain. With a smile, Cain tucked the letter away and set out on his path. His first stop, a forest teeming with Kuromi demons. He wasted no time slaying them, cutting down foe after foe with ease. One demon with a tribal mark on his eye sneered, You're not bad, kid, but you insulted Kuromi. That's unforgivable. Before he could finish, Cain interrupted with a clean strike. You talk too much. As the battle raged on, Cain's sword broke mid-swing. He sighed. This sword didn't even last through 100 demons. 2 remaining demons charged at him, screaming, You bastard! Cain dispatched the first effortlessly, muttering, First come, first served. The second demon begged for his life. Wait, please let me explain. Cain wasn't in the mood. He silenced the demon with a punch that shattered his nose. Cain then grumbled that knocking people out without killing them is harder than it looks. The guy fell to the ground begging our MC. He told Cain that he's just a low-level Kuromi with no value. Cain said he's aware. The guy was like, Huh? How did he know? Turns out that our MC has a pendant that detects evil, and for this guy here, the pendant shines white, which means he's not evil. Cain then told the guy that he sees potential for his rehabilitation. He should repent in prison. With the battle over, Cain grabbed a new sword from the corpses and was about leaving when he noticed a bright figure on a nearby rooftop. It was someone he recognized, a sword master his grandfather once introduced him to. Cain then said he would leave the fate of this Kuromi to the master. The master observed Cain, impressed. So, this is the foreigner who slays Kuromi demons with a single stroke. He was eager to see who it was, but he's now more shocked by the fact that Cain could sense his presence from that distance. Is not an ordinary person indeed. But he wondered, why did he let one of the Kurumi go? It's as if Cain left the last person's fate to the man. But as he was looking, a lady walked up to him and called out, Master! She asked him, what is he doing here? But the master said, yeah, he has a place to go first, and sprinted away from the building. As he was sprinting, the girl said she will follow him too. And as they were running, just as the last guy was about escaping, they struck him with a stone on his head, adding to the pain Cain has caused him already. As they landed, the master said with a sigh that he almost let him escape. The disciple asked him, who is this person? And the master said, the guy is a Kurumi demon. Upon hearing this, the disciple became furious and the smile on her face changed. She pointed her sword to the Kuromi and said, he is still alive. Can she finish him off? The master declared, no, the Kuromi will be judged by the law at the government office. However, his disciple asked if it's necessary to go through such trouble. Why not kill him immediately? She believed immediate action was the best solution. The master replied calmly, someone specifically requested that he handle the Kuromi himself. The girl frowned in disbelief. What? Who could make such a request from such a distance? How did they even know her master was here? She was shocked, realizing that whoever it was must have detected the master's presence from an extraordinary range. Even the top disciples of the clan struggled to locate the master despite their best efforts. The only reason she could find him now is because she knows the places he occasionally visits. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to track him. The master smiled faintly. That child has good eyes. The disciple's surprise deepened. Child? Is her master saying it was a child who managed to accomplish this? Is he around her age? The master nodded. Yes, about the same age. At that moment they noticed a broken sword lying on the ground. The master chuckled dryly. It seems to be the sword the boy used to fight the Kuromi demons. The girl's eyes widened. For the sword to break, does that mean he didn't use internal energy to shield the blade? Then it clicked for her. She realized with amazement. Wait, he defeated the Kuromi demons without relying on internal energy. That means his physical skills and swordsmanship are superior to hers. Meanwhile, in the central continent, an autonomous region established to promote peace between all 4 continents, people from across the world gathered in harmony. The area was bustling with life, lined with specialties and famous goods from every corner of the world. Merchants eagerly advertised their businesses to the lively crowd. Amid this bustling scene, our MC strolled through the marketplace. Observing the overwhelming crowd, he muttered to himself with dry eyes, "There are too many people. Where's the train station?" As Kane wandered, a woman resembling a shaman approached him. She began to speak, but Kane interrupted. "I'm not interested." The shaman, undeterred, urged him not to say that. She told him that the person who'll read his future is the priestess from the second continent, the one who sees fate. Before Kane could respond, a silver-haired beast woman appeared and addressed the shaman. She'd like to meet someone who can tell her fortune. The shaman nodded. Of course. What would she like to predict? The silver-haired woman explained. She can see other people's fates, but she can't hers, so she's eager to find someone who can. Kane paused, observing the woman. He noticed her silver fox-like features and realized she was from the Silver Fox clan. Before he could think further, the woman turned to him and asked, "Does he find her ears and tail strange?" Kane started to apologize, but the woman waved it off with a smile. No need to apologize. She thought he might be interested in her. How about it? It must be fate that they met like this. Why don't they get their fortunes told together? He should not worry. She would pay for both of them. Kane, feeling awkward, declined. The woman sighed and said, "It's fine. She'll leave then." She walked away, and the shaman, now losing both potential customers, muttered in frustration, "Damn it, what a terrible day." As the silver-haired woman left Neriel, her bodyguard approached and suggested, "Should we deal with that guy for turning you down, princess?" The woman turns out to be a princess from the second continent and the real priestess who sees fate. She shook her head. "No, leave him be. She was the rude one." The princess remarked that it was fine if they ignored minor incidents. She confessed she was more intrigued by the guy from before. Upon hearing this, Neriel gasped and asked if the princess had fallen in love with the guy at first sight. The princess smiled and denied it, explaining there must have been a misunderstanding. That was not what she meant. Neriel apologized, but the princess continued, saying she was interested in our MC because she couldn't see anything about him. The princess elaborated, stating that she couldn't see anything about his fate, even with her abilities as a priestess of the oracle. She described it as if everything about him was a mystery. His presence was entirely flawless, colorless, odorless, and enigmatic. It was the first time in her life this had happened, and she couldn't help but feel compelled to speak with him. Neriel asked if they should investigate the guy further, but the princess refused, insisting it wasn't necessary. She reassured Neriel they would likely cross paths again. Surprised, Neriel pointed out that the princess had just mentioned she couldn't see his fate. However, the princess clarified that while she couldn't see his fate, she saw something else entirely. Oddly enough, their destinations aligned. When she looked at him, she was reminded of an old gentleman she had met by chance 10 years ago. That man had been none other than our MC's grandfather, the notorious villain. Neriel hesitantly asked if the man could be the villain who had stolen the first Beast King's treasure. The princess nodded, recalling how Flucklet had once told her that fate was something one must grasp for themselves. If she couldn't see anything, she needed to take action. For some reason, those words had stuck with her since then. That was why she unconsciously noticed the train tickets our MC held, confirming they would meet again at the same destination. Meanwhile, Kane, after getting on a train, reflected on the silver-haired woman he had encountered earlier, wondering if she was the priestess his grandfather had warned him about. Before Kane's departure, his grandfather had spoken cryptically about 3 stars influencing his fate, and one of them being a priestess of the Silver Fox clan. She was said to be destined to pierce his heart with a spear. Kane found it strange that the priestess, supposedly his enemy, had shown him kindness instead of hostility. He speculated that his fate might have shifted toward neutrality. If so, he wondered if other aspects of his destiny had also changed. His grandfather had warned him that more than 20 individuals were destined to kill him. Kane's journey was, in essence, a desperate attempt to twist those fates and survive. After some time, Kane arrived in Barakal, the capital of the central continent. He sought out a renowned blacksmith's establishment and was greeted by a female blacksmith. She inquired about his purpose, and Kane explained that he was searching for Kyle Sama. Startled, the blacksmith stammered, mentioning that Kyle-sama rarely entertained walk-ins. To meet him, one usually needed an appointment. Kane presented a box, stating that it was for Kyle-sama. When the blacksmith asked what was inside, Kane admitted he didn't know, only that his grandfather had forbidden him to open it. He assured her that if Kyle-sama still refused to meet him after seeing its contents, he would leave quietly. The blacksmith took the box to Kyle-sama, musing that Kane wasn't the arrogant customer she had initially thought. As she departed, a male clerk named Dean entered, chastising her for attending to annoying customers. He remarked that she was far too kind. However, Kane noticed the man's aura was black, marking him as evil. Din mocked Kane, calling him a pesky bastard, and suggesting he use money if he wanted to meet Kyle-sama. However, Kane kept his thoughts to himself and instead commented, "It's strange. A blacksmith clerk with a black aura like that? Someone like him deserves to be dealt with immediately." Din, noticing Kane's stare, suddenly turned his attention toward him. His face twisted in annoyance as he barked, "Pesky bastard! If you want to meet Kyle-sama, stop with these shabby tricks and use money. Become a VVIP, and he'll get a chance to meet him." Walking up to Kane, Din sneered and continued, "Not that someone like him could ever afford it." Kane, unbothered by Din's aggression, smiled faintly and replied, "Even if he had the money, he wouldn't have a reason to buy their weapons." Din's irritation grew, his voice rising. "What did you just say? Are you trying to act stubborn?" Kane shook his head. "Not stubborn, just stating a fact. There's no reason to buy a sword that can't even handle his strength." Din's expression darkened further. "Does he think their famous swords would break?" "Of course," Kane replied calmly. "Their sword would break in his hand." With a wicked grin, Din leaned closer. "Is that so?" He asked Kane to show him his strength. "He'll take responsibility." Kane tilted his head slightly, his voice turning sarcastic. "Can someone like you even take responsibility for anything?" This remark struck a nerve with Din. "What did you just say?" he shouted, his voice trembling with anger. While Din fumed, Kane's attention shifted to a nearby sword. Its flashy, eye-catching design stood out in the room. "Oh, wait. There's a third-rate sword over there. Even someone like Din could probably take responsibility for that." Din growled, his fists clenching. "You bastard!" Kane ignored the outburst, walking up to the sword. He examined it briefly before smirking. "It's a replica," he declared. "It looks flashy on the outside, but it's just poor quality trash. A sword that suits the clerk perfectly." Din froze, his anger replaced by shock. "How did Kane know it's a replica just by looking at it?" he demanded. Kane didn't answer immediately. Instead, he swung the sword lightly, and with a loud bang, the blade shattered in midair. Din was stunned, his jaw dropping as he stared at the broken weapon. "What the hell just happened?" he stammered. "No matter how bad the replica is, how did this boy break it with a single swing?" As the commotion unfolded, a powerful voice cut through the room. "I haven't visited this store in a while, and it seems I've come at an interesting time." Everyone turned to see Kyle-sama, the blacksmith boss. Kyle's sharp gaze landed on the shattered remains of the sword. He directed his attention to Din. "Deputy Manager Din," Kyle began, "why is such garbage even placed in this sanctuary? Explain yourself." Din's confidence crumbled as panic set in. He told Kyle-sama that it wasn't his fault. He said it was Kane who suddenly destroyed the sword. Trying to shift the blame, he said that they should call the guards immediately. Kyle raised a hand, silencing him. "Shut up, Din," he commanded firmly. He didn't ask about Kane. He asked why such trash sword is here in the first place. Din trembled, unable to speak, as he stood there, deprived of words and water. He didn't know how to deny the accusations against him. Kyle-sama observed his reaction and calmly stated, "His reaction says it all. Now they understand why rumors about defects in their weapons are spreading. This incident cannot be overlooked." He then ordered 2 of his other blacksmiths to take Din away for punishment. As they dragged him out, Kyle-sama warned Din to be prepared. He would pay dearly for tarnishing the store's reputation. As Din was being taken away, he begged Kyle-sama to listen, but Kai dismissed him, calling him a trash. Dean muttered that their swords were subpar. He said that our MC had belittled Lord Kale's sword. Kane had said their swords couldn't withstand his strength, and even if he had the money, he wouldn't buy such third-rate weapons. Kai-sama glared at him, ordering him to be quiet. "I'll deal with you later," he added. Once Din was out of earshot, Kyle-sama turned to Kane and asked, "Everything that Din said just now, was it true?" He asked if Kane said all that about their swords. Our MC nodded. "Yes, it's true." Kyle-sama sighed. He had high hopes for Kane. When he brought this item from Flukelid, Kyle's old friend, he thought it would be something remarkable. He handed the stick back to Kane, which he had received as a present, and said, "Take it back. He'll pretend this never happened." Kane caught the stick and examined it, realizing it was what was inside the box his grandfather had given him. Suddenly, Kyle-sama presented Kane with a sword, a blade among the top 3 famous swords on display. Take this. Leave my sight immediately, he instructed. Cain, however, looked at the sword with disdain. Kael-sama, sensing his hesitation, asked, "Don't you like it?" He recalled Cain's earlier words about their swords not being worth buying and now asked, "What will you do? Will you pay for this sword with gold coins?" Cain took the sword but spoke up. Although his previous statement was insensitive, he understood if Kael took it as an insult. But it's a misunderstanding. He unsheathed the sword and explained, he didn't mean to belittle their sword, he only spoke the truth. It's not just their sword, any famous sword can't withstand his strength. With a powerful swing, the sword shattered instantly. Kai-sama stared in shock. How surprising. The famous sword broke without mana being infused. It's unbelievable that a boy like him with just raw strength can put such pressure on the sword. A while later, both Kael-sama and Cain sat down, and the old man apologized. He was wrong to insult the grandson of Fluklid. Cain, however, responded, "No, it's him who should apologize." He also said something rude. Deep down, Cain reflected on his actions, realizing that he needed to be more considerate. He's not good at understanding people's feelings, he thought to himself. Kai-sama then asked, "What's the reason Cain came to see him?" Bringing a mistletoe branch suggests it's something important. Cain seemed surprised. Oh, so that piece of wood was a mistletoe branch? He didn't know. Kael-sama, intrigued, asked, "You brought such a rare item without knowing what it was?" Cain answered, "Yes, his grandfather told him never to open the box. By the way, is this branch really that valuable?" Kael-sama nodded. Valuable isn't the right word, it's a treasure among treasures. Anyone would call it divine. At the mention of the word divine, Cain muttered to himself, his grandfather must have stolen this. He then voiced aloud, "For a divine item, the mistletoe has a weak aura." Kael-sama chuckled and said, "That's because it's not precious yet. But if he make weapons from this mistletoe branch, it can give any sword the qualities of a divine weapon." Cain, intrigued, asked if he will make a sword for him out of it. Kael-sama was shocked and asked what he meant. Cain explained, "As you can see, he can't wield metal properly. Any famous sword he uses breaks before he can even swing it, but there's a reason for this." Cain revealed that 10 years ago, after consuming the treasure of the deep sea, an item his grandfather stole, his body became unable to handle metals. It's not just iron. Even materials like orichalcum and meteorite are destroyed when he touched them. All weapons are made of metal, so he've never had his own weapon. He always have to borrow one. Kael-sama nodded slowly. A destructive nature, he've heard of it. Sounds like the legendary beasts of the deep sea. If this is Cain's constitution, now he understands why Fluklid sent that mistletoe branch. A weapon made from it wouldn't be affected by Cain's condition. Cain stood up suddenly. Does that mean he can finally have his own sword? Kael-sama smiled. Yes, he can. Cain nodded eagerly. Please, make me a sword. Kael-sama reassured to trust in him. He'll have it ready soon. Cain then began to leave the Ironheart's building. As he walked away, he thought to himself, he almost gave up on having a weapon, but this might be the last gift from his grandfather. Suddenly, Cain noticed a commotion among the blacksmiths. They seemed frightened, murmuring that they needed to report something to their boss. As the lady moved to inform him, Cain approached her and asked, "What's going on?" They seemed serious. The girl was like, "Cultivator guest?" From her expression, Cain asked her if Din escaped by chance. Startled, the girl said yes. She promised they would capture him and bring him to justice. They begged Cain to forgive them for letting Din escape. Cain found the situation awkward. He thought, is it really necessary for them to apologize this much for letting Din escape? He recalled the girl calling him cultivator guest and realized that they had misunderstood him as a master from the fourth continent. Most masters from there were known for difficult personalities, which is why the clerks feared him. Among them, the only one with a normal personality was the sword god. Cain, aware of their misunderstanding, told them, "Lift your heads up." The clerks, relieved, thanked him for understanding, but before they could look up, Cain had already disappeared. Not far from the Ironheart's building, our MC was suddenly attacked by a group of notorious criminals. The leader of the gang ordered his warriors to kill Cain, dead or alive. Anyone who brings him down gets 3 ounces of gold. The criminals cheered, eager for the reward. As they continued yapping, Cain noticed their dark auras. These are evil people. He don't need a reason to slay them, he thought. With a swift movement, he began cutting through them, thinking to himself, they're all third-rate. However, his sword broke again during the battle. One of the criminals yelled, calling Cain an idiot for leaving his back wide open. But Cain quickly dodged the attack. Since he had no sword, he used his fists to strike back, delivering a barrage of punches. Then, Cain picked up an axe and launched it toward one of the criminals, shattering his skull as if it were a balloon. Now, turning to the remaining attackers, one of them asked the captain, "Who the hell is this guy?" The captain assured him not to be scared, stating that the opponent was alone and posed no threat to all of them. But before he could finish speaking, Cain knocked him down and raised his sword toward his leg. With a swift strike, Cain stabbed him in the chest, killing him instantly. The remaining attackers, about 3 in total, yelled, questioning how dare he kill their captain. But just as they were about to attack him, our MC spinned like a tornado and slayed them all at once. Only 2 attackers were left now. The first one, trembling, said he'd been threatened. If he didn't help with the attack, they would have killed his family. Cain, as vicious as ever, slayed him in an instant. Then, he walked up to the last attacker. Before killing him, he said he would ask him one question, and if he answered honestly, he would spare his life. The man, crying, yelled that it was a lie. Cain would kill him anyway, no matter what he said. Our MC, however, gave an oath on his sword, a promise made by a swordsman to their blade. Breaking it would restrict the use of mana, and for a master, it could be fatal. Cain then swore on his sword that if the man answered honestly, he wouldn't harm him. The man, unsure but desperate, asked if Cain was truly serious. "All right," the man said. "What do you want to ask me?" Cain asked him who had sent them to attack. The man paused for a while, but after some silence, Cain grew impatient. He stabbed the man in the leg and demanded, "Will you answer my question?" The man yelled in pain and finally said, "It was Din. It was Din who sent them to attack Cain." Cain nodded as expected. "It's him," he muttered. "There's no one else." He then asked the man, "What is the root of this request?" The man replied that there was a large organization based in the capital, Barakal. Din had used his connections to get them involved. Cain muttered in disgust. "Trash, Din." He realized that this man had to be part of a criminal organization. It made sense now. Working fraud in the shop wasn't the level of black mana Din could pull off. Cain then asked, "Where is their base?" The man replied, "There's not just one. It's a huge organization with many branches. The headquarters, though, is at the resting place Leon. That's their main base of operations. And that's where the request came from." Cain processed the information. "Resting place Lan. It's close from here. It reeked of an evil aura." He turned to the man. "Just to make sure, he's not lying, right?" The man swore that he wasn't lying, and Cain nodded. "All right, I believe you. It doesn't seem like he's lying." The man then said he would leave, but Cain stopped him. "No, I'll kill you." The man yelled, "Didn't he swear on his sword that he wouldn't kill him?" Cain responded coldly. "Unfortunately, the sword oath doesn't apply to him." The man's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. The sword oath applies to every swordsman." Cain smirked. "Not anymore. Since he ate the celestial peach his grandfather stole, the gift of mana disappeared from his body. The restrictions that bind mana no longer apply to him." The man, still in shock, said, "Wait, even so, breaking a warrior's promise of pride, it's not right." Cain nodded. "Yes, a warrior's pride is important, but there are exceptions. A promise made with a villain is not a promise." Cain swung his sword with a swift motion, decapitating the man. The man's head hit the ground with a sickening thud, and his sword shattered in the process. Afterward, Cain let out a sigh. He thought this sword would last for a while, but it didn't even last 10 swings, he muttered. As expected, he need a sword that won't break. In the resting Leon, Cain examined the environment. The building, from the outside, looked like a normal lodge. But that was only true for the lobby and the exterior. When anyone used the hidden passage inside and went to the basement, they found a place filled with notorious criminals. It was a hub where all kinds of dangerous individuals gathered. Inside the building, a group of criminals were gambling. They even humiliated a little boy by the side, treating him like a dog. One of them sneered and asked their fellow member, "Where did you get this little brat from?" He laughed and answered, "He grabbed him from some random place." Meanwhile, a man yelled in frustration, "Damn it!" It turned out to be Din, Ironheart's former deputy manager, who's on the run. He muttered angrily about the idiots he sent, who couldn't even handle Cain. More importantly, he looked up and saw a masked man. Had he known the man was coming, he wouldn't have left those bastards to handle our MC. He would have sent the masked guy to deal with Cain himself, Dean said, his frustration growing. The masked man was well known as a capable figure, even in Atla, the most notorious organization across the 4 continents. For him to be here, it meant that the boss had high expectations of Din. Din then asked the masked man if he was planning to make his move right away. The masked man responded coldly, "What do you mean, make a move?" Din asked, "Isn't he here to deal with Cain who disgraced him?" The masked man shook his head, explaining that the only orders he had were to retrieve something from Dean, nothing else. He was only told to get the information that Dim had on the Iron Heart, the masked man added, glancing at Dean. "Are you sure you don't have something more to report to the general boss?" Dean froze, a little scared. He wondered if, after giving the masked man the information he needed, the man would kill him. But as if reading his mind, the masked man assured him, "I wasn't ordered to dispose of you. You're safe, for now." The masked man was then handed a small card. He looked at it and said, "All right, He received the item. He'll be leaving now. But Din wasn't done. Wait, he called out. If he's leaving, who's going to protect him while he's on the run? Suddenly the masked man snapped, "Shut up, you fool." He asked if Din did not notice the sudden quiet in the building. Outside, something was definitely going on. Back in the gambling hall, the little boy, who had been humiliated, covered his eyes. "I've already counted to 20, he said. "Can I open my eyes now?" Kane, who seemed to have infiltrated the base, freed the little boy from his chains and gently told him, "Please keep your eyes closed for a little longer." Inside the building, Din and the masked man were both shocked by how Kane had managed to infiltrate their base. They prepared to attack him, but our MC ignored them. He turned his attention to the boy and said softly, "It's fine for him to sleep now. By the time he opened his eyes, he'll be in his mother's arms." Once the boy fell asleep, Kane turned to face Din, and as their eyes clashed, Din felt a chill run down his spine at the sight of Kane. The masked man looked at Din and asked if he knows him. Din nodded, his voice trembling. "Yes, it's him, the damn brat who disgraced him." The masked man chuckled. "Wow, this kid is something else. He's pretty impressive for his age. Was it really necessary for him to go this far by killing their colleagues?" "That's cruel." Kane smirked. "Cruel? How laughable," he said. "They wouldn't even understand the meaning of the word cruel. All he did was decapitate the man boasting about decapitating others. He tortured those who enjoyed tormenting others as hard as he could before killing them. Isn't that fair?" The masked man argued. "Since his opponents were weaklings, shouldn't he have shown mercy?" Kane's grin twisted into something darker. "Mercy? That's a word unfit for them." With that, he unsheathed his sword. "All he offer is endless malice." The masked man bristled and took a fighting stance. Kane's eyes narrowed. "What sin are you guilty of?" The masked man was taken aback, but before he could respond, Kane moved. In a flash, he lunged toward the masked man, slashing his neck. The sword pierced through midway before shattering. The masked man stood stunned, unable to sense Kane's presence at all. Kane then left the man growling in pain. Then, Kane walked toward Din. As he walked, he told the masked man not to move. He had only managed to cut his neck halfway. If the man moved, he would only die struggling in pain. But it seemed like the man wouldn't last long, as he fell to the ground and died. With an evil grin, Kane told Din that now it was just the two of them. Kane's presence alone made a grown man like Din shed tears. As Kane tortured him, Din yelled in pain, and anyone nearby could hear it from miles away. Back at the Iron Arts building, Kane laid the little child he had saved on a couch. He then told Kael-sama everything that had happened. Kael was surprised to hear that Din was a member of Atla, the notorious organization. Then, Kane handed Kael the data chip that Din had intended to give to the organization. Kael observed it closely. "A data chip from the third continent, huh? Seems like an older model." Kane nodded. "He believes it's for security reasons. Since the model came out before mass production, it will be hard to find a tablet to retrieve information from it. Therefore, it will take time to uncover the information Din stole from the workshop." Kael sighed. Now he can't even figure out what information the Atla organization is after, and it makes him restless. Kane told him to remain cautious for now, since they didn't know what the Atla organization was planning. Kael agreed. Yeah, he'll definitely be cautious. After all, he won't be able to make Kane's sword if anything happens. Kael then said, "By the way, he'd been meaning to ask this. Who is that child Kane brought in?" Kane's face went pale. He saved the child from that group of ruffians. He was wondering if Kael could look after him for a while. With Atla involved, he can't exactly trust the government or the guards with him. Kael nodded. "No problem. He'll take care of him and find his parents." Kane thanked him, preparing to leave, but Kael stopped him. "Wait," Kael said. "It's about the box with the mistletoe branches." When he opened the box, he found a secret compartment. Inside was a rolled paper, which seemed to be a letter. It's probably a letter from Fluklid, Kane's grandfather. Kane was surprised. He hadn't expected that to be in there. "Thank you," he said, taking the letter from Kael. As Kane was leaving, he told Kael, he'll contact him when he find a data chip reader. Kael responded, all right. Then Kane left. Meanwhile, back at the resting Roan, the princess and the Neriel inspected the room of dead bodies. So many criminals taken down in such a short time, the princess mused. Who could it be? Who could be powerful enough to face off against Atla? Neriel replied. As far as she knows, there's no one like that in the central continent. The princess wondered, could it be someone on their side? Neriel shook her head. Who knows? But one thing is for certain, the person who did this to the criminals is highly capable. Even if they are on their side, she don't think that's something to celebrate. The princess agreed. That's true. It feels like the person went a little too far. They might be someone impossible to talk to, looking at the way the body was decapitated. It felt like she'd seen this method of killing before. With a glee in her eyes, Neriel said, At least they now know there are others out there hostile toward the Atla organization. The princess nodded. It would be nice if more people like that were out there, fighting against Atla. She paused. Well, whatever the case, she'd like to meet the person who did this at least once. Neriel bowed and said she'll investigate the person. In another scene, Cain went through the letter from his grandfather in a motel. It read, "If he's reading this letter right now, then that means he must have gone to the central continent and met Kyle. He probably would have received a branch of mistletoe and then asked for a sword. Afterward, he should have met the priestess who can see faith." As Cain read, he muttered to himself, although those were all coincidences, how could his grandfather have predicted all that? The letter continued, "Then he must have clashed with the Atla organization at Barakal. If everything has gone according to plan, then Cain will lose his life to Atla." Cain frowned. Lose my life to Atla? In the next scene, Cain woke up early in the morning. As he walked tirelessly with no emotion, he said that if only he had mana, he wouldn't be this tired. People who use mana don't need to sleep for long since mana energizes the body and brain, helping them recover from fatigue. But first he needs to do what he came here for. He walked to a store and asked the owner if they had the TK series. The man replied, "No, that was released years ago. There's no way they have it." Cain left and went to another store. It was the only one left he hadn't checked for what he was looking for. As he entered, he thought to himself, it would be nice if they have what he need. Some unknown time later, the princess and her bodyguard entered the same store. They greeted the store owner and told him they were looking for something. "What are you looking for?" the store owner asked. The princess replied, "She's looking for an old tablet device, something that starts with TK." The man smiled. "Does she mean the TKXD2? It's been getting popular lately. A young man came in a while ago asking for it too." The princess was shocked. "A young man asked for it too?" The store owner nodded. "He sold his last one to him." Neriel whispered to the princess, "There's no way an ordinary person would buy such an old device." The princess speculated, "It must be the Atla organization that wants it." Neriel agreed. "Yes, they should try tracking the buyer." The princess turned to the store owner and said she really want to see the actual TK32XD2. Can he describe who bought the last one? After obtaining the TK device, Cain inserted the data chip into it and was stunned by what he discovered. The data contained detailed plans for battle supplies and acquisitions. The Atla organization intended to gather all weapons stored in Ironheart's blacksmith and kidnap Kyle along with his family to ensure continuous mass production of weapons. Even more disturbing was the information about Kyle's residence and the whereabouts of his daughter. Upon seeing this, Cain thought to himself that he must inform Kyle-sama immediately, or it might escalate into a serious issue. Just as he was about to leave, a voice called out to him saying, "Ah, I've finally found you." Turning around, Cain saw the princess. With a warm smile, she remarked, "I knew it. You're the gentleman I met back at the station." She greeted him, adding, "Hello. You still remember me, right?" Cain, however, was caught off guard. He thought to himself, "Isn't this the princess who can see fate? Why is she here of all times?" The princess then said, "Don't he remember her?" Cain replied, "Yes, he remember." With a relieved smile, she said she's glad. She might have broken down in tears right here, assuming Cain said he don't remember her. Our MC stared at her, wondering what's with this girl. But before he could react further, she raised her foot slightly and leaned toward Cain, as though she wanted to kiss him. Looking into his eyes, she remarked, "The more she looks at him, the stranger it feels. Why can't she see his fate, no matter how hard she looks?" Interrupting the moment, Neriel spoke firmly, "Princess, we should focus on the matter at hand." The princess, as though realizing the urgency, turned back to Cain and asked bluntly, "Are you a member of Atla?" Hearing this, Neriel was shocked. Why would she ask such a direct question? Even if he were a member, wouldn't he deny it? Cain, without hesitation, replied, "No, he's not a member of Atla. In fact, he's against them." The princess smiled softly and said, "She knew it. She knew he wasn't a bad person." Suddenly, a voice echoed from nearby, startling everyone. Cain turned to see who it was. Standing there was a man he instantly recognized as a threat. It was Show Python, an executive of Atla. The sight of him caused everyone to tense up. Show Python smirked and said, "Isn't that the princess of the second continent? What a surprise to find her here." Sensing the danger, Neriel stepped forward to shield the princess and warned Python, "Don't come any closer or he won't like what she'll do." Python chuckled and said, "Relax. He won't come any closer. Instead, why don't they tell him why they're here in the central continent?" The group remained silent. Python, unbothered, glanced at a device in his hand and said, "They don't need to answer. Anyone buying the TK device is clearly here to investigate Atla." His eyes narrowed as he scanned them. "But it wasn't the princess who purchased it, was it? It was you." His gaze landed on Cain. Cain showed no reaction, but Python continued, They deliberately placed it in a second-hand shop to lure out those resisting them. And thanks to that, they've caught a big fish today. Despite this, Python seemed puzzled. Who is he anyway? Is he with the princess? Or just an ordinary person who stumbled into this mess? Cain, maintaining his calm, replied that he's just an ordinary person who knows nothing. Python burst into laughter. Fine, he'll believe that for now. After all, our MC is not a beastman. Suddenly, members of Atla began setting up speakers around the area. Python announced, "Now, they shall all enjoy a little show." With that, he pressed a button, and an eerie sound emitted from the speakers. The sound had a devastating effect. Both the princess and Neriel began to lose strength, collapsing to the ground. Python laughed loud and declared, "That's the power of the anti-beastman weapon." He told them to sleep well. When they wake up, they'll find themselves in an underground prison. Neriel, struggling to stay conscious, whispered, "I'm sorry, princess." She couldn't protect her. Cain stood frozen, powerless to act as he watched them faint. Python turned to Cain, his grin widening. "Now it's your turn." Seeing our MC stand there so blankly makes him seem like an ordinary person, but he couldn't let him go. He told Cain to come quietly, promising to release him if nothing came up in the investigation. Cain smirked. "So, you're taking me to your base?" "Yes," Python replied. "Put on the handcuffs. I don't plan to hurt you. Besides, they captured the princess thanks to him, so he's in a good mood." He held up the handcuffs. "These are flow iron, the strongest metal in the world. They suppress special powers like mana, and their cost exceeds that of a mansion." Cain grinned. "Fine, he'll follow him to their base." Sometime later, Neriel woke up in a cold prison cell, her hands and feet shackled. She shivered and looked around. "Where am I?" she muttered. Realizing the princess was gone, she screamed, "Princess, where are you?" Cain, sitting nearby, said calmly, "You're awake. He said that Atla took her master a while ago." Neriel panicked. "No, they might hurt her." Cain told her to relax for now, there are no guards here. Someone called them away. She noticed his shackles and asked if he's against Atla too? Or is he with them? Cain replied, "He's against them. They're after his sword." "Your sword?" she asked. Cain said, "Yes. It's yet to be made, but it will be one of a kind. He won't let them have it. That's why he'll crush them." Neriel frowned. "Crush them? We're powerless. These shackles suppress mana, and even the Beast King couldn't break them." Cain stood and grinned. "Flow iron is still just metal. It can't restrain him." With a loud crack, he shattered his shackles. Neriel gasped. "How did he do that? This is the strongest iron in the world." Cain walked over. "Stay still. He'll break hers too." And bang, he shattered her shackles with ease. Neriel stared in disbelief. "Is she dreaming? How did he break them?" Cain smirked. "Let's go. They need to save the princess. They took her that way." In another room, Python stood over the princess. "The priestess of fate," he mocked. "Rejoice, princess of the second continent. Thanks to her, he might get promoted." The princess glared at him with disgust. Python chuckled. Such defiance, those eyes. He'd feel like gouging them out for his collection. The princess smirked. "How about she gouge out his eyes instead? He'd enjoy it more." Python grinned. "Sharp tongue, I like that." He brought out a tool and said, "The boss might get mad, but taking one of her eyes should be fine." The princess, though scared, dared him. "Do it. But she'll return this humiliation twice as hard." Python stepped closer, but a loud crash interrupted him. He turned and yelled, "What's going on? I said no one should interfere." Cain appeared, sprinting toward him. With a powerful kick, he sent Python flying. Before Python could recover, Cain delivered another blow, leaving him writhing in pain. Cain turned to the princess and asked if she's okay. She nodded, but said, "These shackles, they can't be broken." Without talking too much, our MC broke her shackles instantly. She stared in shock. "How did he break flow iron?" Cain didn't answer. "Your guard is outside. Go. I have something to settle with Python." Cain asked the princess to wait outside with her guard, explaining that he could not let anyone see what he was about to do. The princess complied and stepped outside. Upon seeing the princess, Neriel smiled warmly and hugged her, expressing relief that she was safe. However, their brief moment of peace was shattered by piercing screams coming from the room. It was Python's voice, pleading with Cain to stop. The sound reverberated through the building, leaving everyone outside tense with unease. The princess told Neriel that Cain mentioned conducting an interrogation, but she found it unsettling. For Cain to make an executive of Atla scream in such agony, it was almost incomprehensible. Neriel added that Cain had even destroyed the flow iron handcuffs earlier. She began to question who Cain truly was, and what his ultimate goal might be. Moments later, Cain emerged from the room, apologizing for making them wait and urging them to leave. "It's dangerous here," he said firmly. The princess, unable to contain her curiosity, asked about Python's fate. "What did you do to him?" she asked. Cain responded bluntly. He's dead. Despite Kane's warning, Neriel insisted on confirming it with her own eyes. Kane tried to dissuade her, warning that she would regret it, but her determination drove her forward. When she entered the room, she was confronted with a horrifying sight. Python's body had been mangled beyond recognition. His organs and eyeballs were severed, and his form was crushed in ways that defied belief. Overcome with shock, Neriel vomited at the gruesome scene. She couldn't help but wonder how Kane had managed such destruction in so little time. In the next scene, Kane revealed that he had extracted critical information from Python. Using this knowledge, they located the Atla branch's base. The structure loomed ominously in the fog. No wonder it was hard to find, Kane remarked. They've set up their base in a place like this. Once inside, Kane pointed to a blueprint. It contained details about a device that had neutralized Neriel and Kyle during their previous encounter. Both of them stared in shock as Kane explained the device's function. It targeted beastmen specifically, disrupting their blood flow, which was vital for enhancing their bodies through mana. The device was deadly, rendering beastmen powerless. Kyle, stunned by the revelation, said, "No wonder Python's attacks left them so helpless." Kane admitted he couldn't fully grasp the device's principles, but he understood its devastating effects. Neriel trembled as she looked at the blueprint and declared that beastmen should avoid using blood flow techniques for a while. They both bowed and thanked Kane for obtaining such vital information. Kane, however, dismissed their gratitude, saying, "Don't worry about it. I have my own goals." Kane then shifted the discussion to Atla's objectives. He explained that their ultimate aim was the collapse of the central continent. By doing so, they could destabilize the peace agreements between the 4 other continents, eventually plunging the world into chaos. Atla intended to spark intercontinental wars, exhaust military strength, and seize power during the ensuing turmoil. The princess and Neriel were horrified. "Is this what they've been planning all along?" Neriel asked, her voice shaking. Kane clenched his fists in anger, muttering to himself that he now understood the meaning of his grandfather's cryptic warnings. He told them that this was all he could share for now, and that he needed to act independently from here on. The princess protested, saying they hadn't properly thanked him for saving them. She pleaded with Kane to visit their base, but he declined, citing an urgent matter. He explained that Atla might launch an attack on Ironheart soon, and he needed to warn Kyle-sama. As Kane prepared to leave, the princess held his hand and asked, "Can you at least promise to meet me again?" Kane hesitated but eventually agreed. "All right, they should meet tomorrow at 6 p.m. at Sarah's Tavern," he said. The princess nodded, promising to be there. As Kane leaped away, Neriel remarked, "This guy has some incredible skills, comparable to even their Beast King." The princess nodded thoughtfully. "Don't she think it's somehow fateful? He's the only one whose fate she cannot see, and he saved her life." She decided then and there to ask our MC for his real name when they met the next day. In the next scene, Kane arrived at Ironheart and knocked on the door. Kyle-sama opened it, surprised to see him so late. "Kane, what brings you here at this hour?" Kane replied, "He've confirmed the contents of the data ship that Dean had." A while later, Kane filled KKL-sama on all the information he had gathered. Kyle-sama couldn't believe what he was hearing. Holding his head in despair, he exclaimed, "Those Atla guys. He can't believe they were plotting all this against him." Kane informed him that Atla's ultimate goal was war. To ensure a steady supply of weapons, they would undoubtedly try to seize Ironheart. Kyle-sama sighed heavily and admitted he did predict this might happen eventually, but he didn't expect it to happen so soon. Kane then suggested that Kyle-sama and his craftsmen should hide somewhere for their safety. However, Kyle-sama sternly replied, "That's impossible. If Atla discovers they're onto their plans, they will launch an attack. No matter where we hide, they'll find us, and because Kane attacked their base, they will now be searching for him desperately. If they suspect Kane is working with Kyle, it'll be over for them." Kane apologized, acknowledging that he had been careless, but Kyle-sama reassured him. "Don't worry about it. He must have been anxious because of the mistletoe branch. He should focus on his own goal instead." Kyle promised to make the sword for him. However, Kane interrupted. "What's the issue, Kyle-sama?" Kyle-sama asked if he knows about the Sertretan substance. "It's a special metal from the second continent, and it's essential to neutralize the unique properties of the mistletoe branch. Without it, he can't complete the sword, but obtaining it is extremely difficult." Kane thought for a moment and then said, "If that's all is needed, he might know someone who can help." In the next scene, Kane met the princess at a cafe, as planned. As she sipped her tea, she was startled when Kane abruptly asked about the Sertretan metal. "Why does he need it all of a sudden?" she asked, curious. Kane explained, "It's for something important. Can she get it as soon as possible?" It became clear that Neriel's sword was made from the substance Kane was searching for. As the princess glanced at the sword, Neriel snapped, "No, she can't give it away." The princess turned to Neriel, her smile sharp and calculating. "Neriel," she said, repeating the name softly, over and over. Eventually, Neriel sighed and reluctantly handed over the sword. This sword was a gift from the Beast King, Neriel said. It's as valuable as her life. But fine, take it. Cain graciously thanked her and promised, if they need information about Atla's bases, he'll share what he know. The princess raised an eyebrow. He actually have intel on the other bases? Cain nodded. Yes, and he'll tell them everything. But first, they should focus on forming an alliance. Surprised, the princess asked, an alliance? With them? Cain explained that he'd been acting alone this whole time. To defeat Atla, he need reliable and trustworthy allies. The princess asked if he can really trust them. Cain smiled. He could tell from their aura that they're trustworthy. But in return, if they can't trust him too, then it can't be helped. The princess abruptly stood up and declared, no, they trust him too. And if that means forming an alliance, then so be it. Cain nodded. He don't know how long they'll work together, but he'll rely on them for now. With that, they sealed their alliance. Cain then took his leave, explaining that he needed to deliver the sword to Kyle-sama. Before he left, the princess handed him a map. This is the map of the inn where they'll be staying. Come by later. Then she told him that her name is Shia Velvistrin. In turn, our MC introduced himself simply as Cain before heading out. In the next scene, Cain returned to Kyle-sama and presented the sword made from the seer Tretan substance. Kyle-sama was astonished. This is the Black Wolf sword. How did he get his hands on such a thing? Cain grinned. It wasn't easy, but it's yours now. Kyle-sama promised with this, he'll forge him a divine weapon, something far beyond anything he've wielded before. Later, Cain arrived at the Beastmen's lodgings. To his surprise, their base was located on the main street rather than the outskirts of town. He knocked on the door, and Neriel answered. I didn't expect you to come so soon, she said. Cain replied, the task didn't take long, but more importantly. He paused, sensing a dark aura nearby. His expression hardened. As he approached the source, Cain unsheathed his sword and smiled coldly. This must be the spy that leaked the Beastmen weakness to Atla. The man with the dark aura stepped back nervously. Why are you coming closer? Cain's voice dropped. Don't play dumb, you scumbag. You know what you did. In one swift motion, Cain struck, severing the man's head. The body fell lifelessly to the ground as the other Beastmen yelled in shock. Why did he kill their member? They demanded. Our MC sheathed his sword and replied calmly, sorry for the delayed introduction. His name is Cain, and he'll be staying with them for a while. Please, take care of me. One of the beast women yelled at Cain, calling him a bastard, and launched an attack. Cain parried her assault with ease, sending her flying backward. The rest of the beastmen roared, declaring they wouldn't let him go unpunished. Cain calmly responded, it seems like there's been a misunderstanding. However, the beastmen didn't give him a chance to explain. As they charged at him, Cain skillfully blocked their attacks as if it were a fencing match. His movements were precise and deliberate, and he quickly defeated them all. During the fight, he glanced at Neriel and noticed she had no intention of intervening. He thought to himself that if the priestess who could see fate were present, she would have resolved this misunderstanding with ease. One of the strongest beastmen warriors lunged at Cain with his spear. Cain blocked the attack, causing the blade to shatter. Addressing the warrior, Cain said, the one he killed was a spy, not one of their fellow beastmen. The others, shocked and angered, shouted at him to stop spouting nonsense. They insisted there was no way Jack could have been a spy. Neriel approached Cain and asked, why do you think he was a spy? Cain replied, have they ever heard of the Jeffrey School? It's a school that specializes in body-focused magic. One of their notable creations is this item, he said, pointing to the object on the fallen man's body. It's a body transformation magic tool. Cain removed the item from the corpse, revealing the man's true face. To their shock, the beastmen realized he was a human, not a beastman. That wasn't his true face either. He was using the same magic. The beastmen were stunned, realizing the person they had trusted was never one of them. Cain added, this special magic stone, created by the Jeffrey School, was embedded in his face. It can copy another's unique mana pattern with 100% accuracy. This man was a spy sent by Atla. Now seeing the evidence, Neriel said she understood Cain's actions, but she had two questions. First, how was he able to see through the Jeffrey School's magic when he's just a swordsman? Second, why didn't he inform them that Jack was a spy? Cain replied, he know everything about the 73 schools of magic on the first continent, including their specialties and weaknesses. Neriel was taken aback. You know everything about all 73 schools? She asked in disbelief. Cain nodded and continued. As for why he didn't tell them earlier, it's because of something his grandfather did when he was younger. He once said that the malice within Cain was immense. To manage it, he twisted Cain's instincts so that his malice would only target evil. Now, whenever he faces evil, his body moves unconsciously to eliminate it. He didn't have time to explain, he simply acted. After resolving the misunderstanding, Neriel decided to take Kane to the princess. As they walked, she told him, "Next time, please try to explain things before you act." Kane apologized, promising to try to control himself in the future. To thank him for his efforts, Neriel said she would speak to the princess about arranging a reward. Kane then asked, "Where is the princess right now?" Neriel replied that she's praying on the top floor under the full moon. Kane sighed in relief. "That's good. He thought she might have gone outside. It's too dangerous out there." Neriel snapped. There's no way she'd let the princess go out alone. Besides, the altar where she's praying is safe. However, a sudden realization struck her. She recalled that Jack and another person had prepared the altar. Fearful for the princess's safety, Neriel sprinted to the altar and slammed the door open. She was relieved to find the princess unharmed. The princess, her eyes blazing with power, looked at Neriel and said, "You've come here. Does that mean the lower floors have been attacked as well?" Neriel replied, "It's a bit more complicated than that. She can't explain everything right now." The princess nodded solemnly. "I see. She made the right decision to stay here. Few would dare to challenge her under the full moon, and even fewer could defeat her. The full moon strengthens her, ensuring her safety." Neriel felt reassured, knowing that the princess was in her strongest state under the full moon. There was no way she would fall to an assassin in such a condition. Neriel asked, "By the way, where is the attacker?" The princess replied calmly, "They have been annihilated. They came out of nowhere, and she ended up using too much force. It's unfortunate. If the attackers had survived, they could have captured them for more information." However, her expression changed as she added, "There seems to be one more attacker left. They've completely erased their presence, but her eyes won't be deceived under the moonlight." Without another word, she sprinted away in an instant, determined to locate the hidden enemy. Neriel yelled, "Wait, princess!" But her voice couldn't stop the princess. Neriel thought to herself that only Kane was capable of completely erasing his presence like that, and Kane was not an enemy. She began running after the princess, realizing that under the full moon, the princess's powers rivaled those of the Beast King in his prime. Even Kane might not escape her detection. Meanwhile, the princess closed in on the attacker and engaged them in combat. After a few strikes, she remarked, "You're stronger than I thought." But then, she stopped, surprised and blushing when she realized it was Kane. He had effortlessly blocked her attack. She quickly apologized, saying, "She's so sorry." She thought he was one of the intruders. Kane replied calmly, "No need to worry, it's fine." As Neriel caught up with him, she stood in disbelief. She can't believe it. The princess's surprise attack was completely blocked by Kane. Even the Beast King couldn't have stopped that easily. Does this mean Kane is stronger than the Beast King? Later, they all sat down to discuss what had transpired. The princess sighed and said, "So Jack was actually a spy. It was because of the Jeffrey School's body transformation magic that she couldn't detect his fate." Kane asked, "Is there any connection between the Jeffrey School's magic and her ability to see fates?" The princess nodded. "Yes, as you know, she can see the fates of others so long as they're visible to her naked eye. That's the only condition. She believes it works by observing their mana. If the target hides their mana, she can't see their fates." Neriel immediately scolded her. "Princess, how could you blab about a national secret so easily? She shouldn't reveal such critical information." The princess waved her off, saying, "Even if it's a secret, is it more important than their lives?" With a sigh, Neriel turned to Kane. "What you've just heard is classified information, not for public knowledge." Before Kane could respond, his aura shifted. His eyes turned red, and anger filled his face. The others noticed his sudden change and stared at him in shock. Kane stood abruptly, saying, "Judging by their reactions, they haven't noticed yet. We're under attack. We've been surrounded." Outside, a group of assassins monitored their every move. Hidden in the shadows about 1.5 kilometers from the Beastmen's lodgings, they watched closely. Among them was a man with sharp, rodent-like features, the Rat Man. Using a lens to spy on the lodgings, he muttered, "Why the hell is Jack so late in reporting? What is he doing?" He said that, while they're here struggling, Jack is playing at being a spy. He should stop slacking and get things done. The Rat Man sneered. "When they're done with this job, they should kill Jack. He's useless." Their leader, Rashud, the 12th ranked sacred magic swordsman of the Atla executives, spoke calmly. "There's no need to bother. The transformation magic used on Jack carries significant risks. He should be dead by now." The Rat Man smirked. "Ah, so that's why you sent him. As expected of our boss, always so wise." But Jay, another member of Atla, interrupted sharply. "Shut up, Rat Man. Jack infiltrated the place 30 minutes ago and hasn't reported back. Shouldn't they be worried about that instead?" The Rat Man, as dim-witted as his namesake, confidently claimed that the task was simple, which was why Jack seemed so relaxed. Jay, however, called him foolish, mocking his lack of awareness. Their argument quickly escalated, and they both turned to the commander, asking if they could settle their grudge by killing each other. The commander, with a calm demeanor, allowed them to do as they wished. However, his aura changed abruptly as he warned them with a chilling threat. If anyone dared draw their sword in his presence, he would personally kill them. Startled by the overwhelming killing intent emanating from him, both men froze in fear. They realized they were facing the power of the 12th rank in Atla. The commander turned to Jay, instructing him to inform the others that if there was no contact from their spy within the next minute, they would proceed with the plan. Jay acknowledged the order and left immediately. Meanwhile, the rat man stretched his body and remarked with excitement, "It seems they're finally starting the attack. This makes his blood boil. Right, Commander?" But as he turned, he was horrified to see the commander's head severed from his body. Panic surged through him as he called out to Jay, urging him to alert everyone that they were under attack. However, his voice faltered when he saw Jay's lifeless body, his head also decapitated. Shaken, the rat man stammered, "What the hell is going on? Who's attacking them so quickly that they can't even sense them?" Emerging from the shadows, Cain revealed himself. He calmly stated that he had sensed bloodlust, but it seemed he was mistaken. The rat man, gripping his sword, pointed it at Cain and demanded, "Who are you? Did you kill them?" Cain remained silent, which only fueled the rat man's anger. "When someone asks you a question, you answer," he roared. But in an instant, Cain appeared behind him and coldly said, "A person? Do you really call yourself a person? How about a lump of meat?" Before the rat man could react, Cain struck him down effortlessly. By morning, Neriel concluded that since their location had been compromised, they had to abandon the base. She ordered the remaining soldiers to dispose of anything that might leak information and take only the essentials. The warriors acknowledged her command, swiftly moving to execute her orders. Shortly after, Cain entered the room and announced his return. Neriel thanked him for his hard work in scouting the assassins and asked if he had recorded the number of enemies and identified their commander's face. Cain, with a blank expression, questioned, "Is the number of enemies in the commander's face that important?" "Of course," Neriel replied. "Knowing the enemy's strength and leadership is critical to preparing for the battles ahead." Cain scratched his head and explained, "He killed them all. None of them had faces left, and he wasn't exactly counting." Neriel was stunned. "You defeated all of them in just a few minutes?" she asked, disbelief clear in her voice. Her gaze then fell upon the unfamiliar sword Cain was carrying. "Where did you get that sword?" she inquired. Cain casually replied that he brought it back as a trophy. It belonged to the commander. Neriel's shock deepened. "He defeated Rashud, the sacred magic swordsman, and took his sword?" Cain, still unaware of the significance, asked, "Sacred magic swordsman? Was that his name?" He admitted that he didn't ask before killing him. Neriel explained that Rashud, the man he had slain, was a renowned executive of Atla. The sword Cain now held, Reishi Biertan, was a legendary blade said to be capable of cutting through anything. Cain admitted, he did notice the sword's mana density was unusually high. "So it's a magic sword?" Neriel, now uncertain, muttered, "You didn't even know who he was?" She was astounded that Cain, a swordsman, had never heard of a name as famous as Rashud's, a name known to every swordsman at least once in their lifetime. However, Cain, with a sigh, explained he had no interest in swords. Neriel recalled how Cain had also been unaware of her Black Wolf sword, further fueling her suspicion that Cain might not truly be a swordsman. Meanwhile, Princess Shia was focused on restoring her powers to re-enter her beast mode. After some time, synchronization was complete, and she apologized for the delay. Cain observed her curiously and wondered aloud if she had gathered all her strength just to return to that state. With a serious expression, Shia thanked Cain for scouting ahead and assured him she would handle the rest of the attackers. She urged him to leave the upcoming battles to her, determined not to burden him further. Cain, however, attempted to explain that he had already dealt with the attackers, but Shia dismissed his words and continued forward. She insisted on taking care of the invaders who had dared to infiltrate their base. When Cain repeated that the attackers had already been defeated, Shia halted, her surprise evident. "So fast?" she asked, astonished. Elsewhere, in a small inn located in Suracacia, the capital of the second continent, a lady approached a man radiating an overwhelming presence. She reported that communication with the sacred magic swordsman had been cut off, likely indicating his defeat. The man, revealed to be Thunder Emperor Van and an executive of Atla, was visibly shocked. How could Rashud be defeated? He questioned, disbelief etched on his face. Van could not comprehend how Rashud, someone with the strength to aim for rank 7, had fallen. He repeated in frustration that there was no way Rashud could lose to the Beast King's royal guard. The lady then speculated that the princess, born with a bloodline stronger than even the current Beast King, might have awakened her latent power in the face of death. If this were true, her strength could have temporarily surpassed Rashud's. Acknowledging the unique survival and combat instincts of beastmen, Van admitted that the awakening of visceral blood could indeed explain the situation. Troubled by this development, he instructed the lady to verify these claims through their intelligence network. Depending on the findings, they would reconsider the Beast King's subjugation plan. The lady assured Van they had a backup plan in place and could proceed with the capture of the princess. Van, impressed, remarked on her resourcefulness. "Very well," he said. "I will leave the clan's operations to you. The princess won't escape this time." The next day, at the edge of Barakal Forest, Kane waited for the group to reunite. He recalled how Princess Shia had suggested they act separately and meet at an agreed spot. Arriving 2 hours earlier than scheduled, Kane decided to use the time for introspection. Though he lacked any mana abilities, he mimicked the meditative practices of mana users, reflecting on his grandfather's teachings. His grandfather had once posed a profound question: which comes first, the body or the mind? Unable to answer, Kane was told to contemplate until he understood. As he meditated, he wondered if today might bring him closer to the answer. Elsewhere in the same forest, Princess Shia and Neriel made their way toward the meeting point. Neriel noticed Shia's exhaustion, remarking that awakening her beast mode twice in one day had taken a toll. However, they soon realized they had been walking in circles. "This isn't the first time they've been here," Neriel pointed out. The strange situation unnerved them. Suddenly, they sensed an unusual wave of mana, its intensity creating an odd atmosphere. Could it be a divine object? They wondered. Determined to uncover the source, they rushed toward the mana's origin. Pushing through the dense undergrowth, the sight before them left them stunned. It turned out to be Kane, who sat amidst the forest, mana radiating from his body. The forest creatures surrounded him, drawn to his presence. Upon seeing the scene of animals surrounding Kane, the princess thought to herself that it resembled the famous painting her brother had once shown her, one of the legendary depictions, the peach blossom spring of the celestial realm. She found the sight mesmerizing but was suddenly drawn to another figure. Then she noticed something shifting within Kane. Before she could react, there was a sudden bang. Kane erupted with a powerful change in aura. His eyes turned blood red, his presence radiating a devilish intensity. The princess gasped in awe and muttered, "What is this? Heavenly yet evil sight?" Meanwhile, Kane's consciousness drifted into a transcendent realm. Strangely, it felt as though this was not his first time experiencing such a phenomenon. Since consuming the celestial peach, he could no longer use mana, but during moments of introspection, the mana seemed to temporarily return. Kane pondered this mystery. Was the mana always present during introspection, or did it merely resurface for a fleeting moment? He realized the answer wouldn't come today. As he emerged from his introspection, he became aware of two figures staring at him, Neriel and the princess. Startled, he asked how long they'd been watching. The two looked unnerved but admitted they had only observed for about 5 minutes. Kane was confused. Why hadn't he sensed their presence? Was it because his mind and body detected no danger from them? Or was there something wrong with him? He dismissed the thought and stood up, walking toward the princess. "Good morning," Kane greeted her. But the princess fidgeted nervously, apologizing that she must have seen something strange. Maybe she's still half asleep. Kane pressed her, asking what she meant by strange and what exactly she had seen. About 20 minutes later, the beastmen gathered in the forest for a meeting. They apologized for their delay, explaining they had lost their way. Neriel told them that they are forgiven since the fault was from Kane. Our MC was shocked and asked, how is it his fault? Neriel revealed that Kane's released mana had transformed the forest into a maze. Kane was taken aback. Mana? He didn't recall having any mana. Neriel praised him, marveling at the incredible aura his mana had created. Kane wondered if the natural flow of mana was connected to the celestial peach within him. During introspection, he noted to himself that this was valuable information, bringing him closer to solving his current tasks. However, the princess was still troubled by the image of Kane she had seen earlier. The jet-black darkness that surrounded him lingered in her mind. Was it his destiny? No. She refused to believe that Kane was evil, but if not, then what had she seen? As the meeting concluded, Neriel gave instructions to the beastmen. She assigned roles: communications officers to receive information from their networks, supply officers to transport luggage, and reconnaissance specialists to manage alarms, magic devices, and teleportation spells. Kane commended their capabilities, admitting he had underestimated them before. Neriel informed Kane they would soon return to the second continent for reorganization, though she felt guilty for leaving him after assisting them, but Kane reassured her, saying there would be plenty of opportunities for them to repay his kindness. She mentioned that in 4 days, the royal airship would arrive. If Kane needed anything before then, he should let her know. Just as she finished speaking, Kane noticed a faint lightning spark in Neriel's ear and realized it was a sound link, a method of transmitting messages without sound. Through the sound link, Neriel received shocking news. She turned to Kane, her expression tense. "It seems Atla has started moving," she said. Kane immediately asked, "Are they coming this way?" "Fortunately, no," Neriel replied. "Atla is causing chaos in the capital's downtown area." In another part of the continent, Atla's organization had launched an invasion. They stormed Kyle-sama's Iron Heart blacksmith workshop, ruthlessly torturing the workers. Kyle-sama confronted them, shouting for them to stop, his voice filled with fury. One of the attackers said they would stop if he signs the contract. Upon seeing this, Kyle-sama was shocked. His fear has come to pass.